Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Nick Farabaugh. We're talking about the 2023 NFL Draft, all the way leading up until the draft at the end of April. We were at the Combine. We're at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. We'll be at the Combine at the end of this month. We'll be at Pro Days. We'll talk free agency. We'll get you the whole way through the Steelers off-season process. And today we're just going to kind of stop and talk about the Super Bowl happened 2 nights ago. This is Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and what we feel like we learned from that game and how we can apply the lessons from those two teams to the Steelers and what they're doing this offseason. Nick, I was not surprised that the Chiefs won, but I think there was a lot of the way that they did one that to me felt illustrative. I wrote on the site Monday morning that defense does not win championships anymore. If you want to play with those two teams, you got to score with them. Eagles set an NFL record for the most points scored in a Super Bowl loss. It certainly felt like about 50% of who won that game was going to be who had the ball last. It happened to be the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you take away from a high-scoring offensive Super Bowl that showed us a lot of things about what's important on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take away from this game. Obviously, you have to have the quarterback. I think that's the first, right? Hurts was awesome.
Yeah, it
Mahomes is
helps to have Pat Mahomes. It really makes
right.
it a little easier.
But yeah, you need quarterbacks. You either need quarterbacks or elite schematics or both. And the Chiefs have both. And you can pretty much argue, I think, that so do the Eagles. So, all that meshes well together. But I think when we're talking about Steelers, and kind of what you take away from that game, I think the first thing that jumps out to you is the trench play. Like, it does. I mean, you look at the O-lines for these teams, and they were fantastic. Really, like, they shut down both teams' pass rushes for the most part. I think Chris Jones is kind of that difference maker on the other side of the ball that started to kind of leak through a little bit, and that elite interior D line kind of started to get to Hurts a little bit. Hurts was still fantastic, but they started to disrupt the run game a little bit and put him into third and longs. And it did kind of mess up the Eagles' flow a little bit. So I look at the O-line, though. It's just so important to have a good O-line. I can't understate it. These are the best two offensive lines in football. And you even go back to the week after, last week, why the Bengals lost. A lot of that can easily be placed on their offensive line. Burrow just ran for his life. Jones took over late in the game, and there's that. And then you look at the 49ers, too. Really good O-line, right? Really good O-line. We don't know kind of what they would have if they had their quarterbacks, but really good O-line. Like, you need a good O-line, and then you also need game changers along your defensive line. Chris Jones was as important as anybody was to the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl this year, outside of Patrick Mahomes. And so you need good trench play. And the Eagles feel like they had that, right? They trade for Robert Quinn. Hassan Reddick was kind of his real breakout guy. They have Fletcher Cox still. They have Josh Sweat. They have, obviously, Javon Hargrave. And that D-line just no-showed. It straight up just no-showed. You need big-time defensive players that can take over games. The Steelers have some of that, obviously, already with T.J. Watt and Minka and Cam Hayward. But you need good O-linemen. And this is why when we talk about the Steelers upgrading their offensive line, there's just so much credence to that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the offensive line play was noticeable on both sides of the ball. I thought it gave the quarterbacks time. This was not like the Chiefs won this game, but the Eagles had the more impressive offensive stats. Like, Hurts threw for 300 yards, ran for 70. Like, man, that's like an MVP for performance most years, right? And he ends up losing the game. Not only that, I think the big thing for me is, like, you look at the Steelers, and I think the Steelers pass rush is good enough, like, compared to those teams. It's maybe not as deep as the Eagles, talking about like rotationally. It may be even a little bit better than the Chiefs pass rushing wise. They're not quite as good at stopping the run, maybe, as those teams are with their front seven. But like the Steelers offensive line just does not hold a candle in comparison to those two units. Like, the Steelers on defense can hang with teams like that. Like, but they cannot on offense hold up to that level of trench play over 60 minutes, keep their quarterback clean, run the ball. And, they're bringing back all 5 offensive linemen. They're all back under contract. But I just think they need to find a way to inject more talent into that unit. It is just, and you can sit here and talk about, like, the draft positions of those 10 starters from the Chiefs and the Eagles are not necessarily super high. It's not like those teams used a bunch of first round picks on those guys, but you've got to find the talent wherever you have it. I just don't think the Steelers have enough of it. I think it's a mistake to sit here and think, oh, well, they're just going to continue to get incrementally better. I think they've got to find a way to make a splash in that unit and add a large amount of talent to it.
I think that's like very evident too. It needs to happen. Like there needs to be an upgrade. I think they have some pieces there they can work with. I think James Daniels is the long-term piece for them. I really do. I think honestly, Chooks is starting to kind of get into that mold where he might be. I know you don't completely see that. I thought this was his best season by far.
I mean, it was his best season. I still think he's miscast as a right tackle. I still don't think he run blocks well enough to be a real cornerstone. He's maybe improved to acceptable, but still not good enough.
I think he's pretty solid. I think he's a pretty solid player. Outside of that, though, I don't think
also certainly not good enough to warrant his $11 million cap hit.
Probably true, but I'll say this: I don't think they have an answer from center through left tackle on the roster.
Mason Cole had a really good year, especially when you consider he played most of it on a bad foot.
See,
I just don't know that he's. I don't know how much better he can get. Right, there's not a lot of upside there.
Like Mason Cole's fine; he's a good leader and everything, but he's not. You know, you look at the centers that were in this game: Jason Kelsey and Creed Humphrey. I mean, dude, like. He's not them.
Yeah, you look at the offensive linemen that the Steelers could have had in Creed Humphrey and Landon Dickerson, and then you look at the running backs that those two teams employed for most of this game, and Isaiah Pacheco and Kenny Gainwell, who were fourth and was Pacheco 6th or 7th round? I know it was late day.
Yeah, it was 6. So,
it pretty clearly illustrates that you don't need a star running back. You do, however, I think, need star playmakers. I think that's the other commonality between these two teams. And to me, that's the second big takeaway is guys like AJ Brown and Devonta Smith and Travis Kelce. You know, you have to have those plays where the quarterback just closes his eyes and throws it as hard as he can, and you get 50 yards out of it. Like that, it's too easy for those teams to do it. And if you can't do it, it really puts your team at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an open question as to whether the Steelers have that or not. Obviously, George Pickens showed a good bit of it this season. Deontay Johnson, a very different kind of player, not that kind of game breaker that's going to make his plays in big chunks. I don't know. What are your thoughts about this?
I think it's a very open question, and it comes down to your complete belief in George Pickens. I don't think anyone else on the roster has that potential. I think they have chain movers, like they have a Juju, they have a Dallas Goedert, right? Muth can be that fairly serviceably, and so can Deontay. Like Deontay can be.
Yeah, I think Deontay and Pat Freiermuth are very comparable to like having a Juju and a Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, or even a Devontae Smith, right? Like Deontay can do what Devontae Smith can do, a lot of it, at least. But can George Pickens end up doing what AJ Brown does, and can he do, just in a different way? Can he turn into that? Right now, I think we don't know the answer because I feel like he wasn't afforded opportunities to do a lot other than just go ball down the sideline, make a great catch. And he did do that at an alarmingly high rate, which is very good. But can he win from all three levels of the field? So, you have to worry about AJ Brown on a drag route, a dig route, and a post route. Can that be what George Pickens is? Or is George Pickens just going to be a guy where, 10 yards downfield, that's where you got to worry about him?
Well, I think we saw more of that down the stretch of the season. You think about those touchdowns in the Raiders game. He's over the middle of the field. And against the Ravens, he had another one of those kind of plays in the post area. I think so I think, it's hard from the outside looking in to know, are they not doing more than, fades and goes because that's all George Pickens could do, or because it's an offense with uncreative passing concepts that doesn't make the best utilization of his talent. Like, which is it, right? Because if that's all he can do, then he's a useful player, but he's not a game-changing superstar like AJ Brown.
No, he's Mike
more
Williams
there, and the Steelers are able to tap into it, then maybe they don't have a need in this area.
Well, like the thing is, if he can do that, if he's just a go ball guy, he's Mike Williams, which is
It's
good. Like,
fine.
but he's not the game breaker, right? Like he's not the elite. But I'm not completely ready to just say he's not that.
Yeah,
Because
I'm not giving up on him. I'm just saying I think it's a mistake to assume either right now, right?
I agree. But so like then you kind of come in like this is the guys, this is the argument. If you're arguing for Jordan Addison, like this is the argument.
Or and
You think
let's flesh that out here. Or Quentin Johnson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, all those guys in that kind of top.
Jalen Hyatt.
I don't like Jalen Hyatt, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure,
Yeah.
on this podcast.
Yeah.
He's
We
not in
certainly
that.
will.
He's not in that group. Saunders says,
But he is in the mock draft, so he does figure to be in that group, mock draft wise, from
okay.
predictive
He
measures.
is
Right
also a pure home run hitter, one trick pony, Mike Williams
yes,
type.
yeah. I mean, I'll say
Fair.
this though, man. Like, I don't personally, I don't see that game breaker in this draft. I don't see that number one guy in this draft. I see a bunch of complimentary guys. So I think right now your whole discussion of like, do they have the playmaker is George Pickens that guy? And I think he developed a lot of really good route running tendencies over the year that signal that he could be in for a monster year two leap to where he goes from star to superstar. I think it's possible. So I just think it's kind of going to come down to another thing that we also have to learn is that they need creative passing concepts, but this is Matt Canada's offense. So it's not going to be there. That's not his offense. He's a run first offense. You can be a run first offense.
Run first offense can create big plays in the passing game if you can be successful enough running the ball that you get teams to commit a safety to the box, that you can get teams to bite on play action, which they almost never ran. Like you can have, in fact, this is what the Steelers did. Like if you look back to like the 2005 Steelers, they didn't throw the ball either, but when they did, they had big playability because they got defenses moving forward to stop the run.
That's the basis. So that's the basis of Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Right.
That's the basis of the Nick Sirianni offense. Like it's the whole thing, right? Jalen Hurts is a double go, so you have to worry about Jalen Hurts. You have to worry about the running backs who are good. Like they have three really good running backs and Gainwell, Scott, and Saunders that you have to worry about. And once you can't stop the run game, that's when they hit you. Like okay, and Jalen Hurts, to his credit, kind of they kind of started to slow down the pure running game, and he made those throws, and that's like the big time quarterback that you need, but. That's kind of their whole thing, right? Like they ran the ball pretty well, and then all of a sudden Hurts throws a 50-yard bomb to AJ Brown for a touchdown. Like that's what they want to do, and so you can use the run game to create explosive passing plays. But we just have not seen Matt Canada do that, so it's kind of hard to fully buy into that being a part of the Steelers' philosophy when we haven't seen that fully like there yet. So yeah I mean,
and the other thing I think about this discussion about whether they need another big playmaker, and I kind of think that they do, even if George Pickens turns out to be pretty good. I just don't think their third receiver, whoever it may be right now, is really good enough. But it's also like one of these things where, okay, they need a lot of things. I think that's the one where they could be patient, right? And wait and see what they have with George and then make a decision going forward, as opposed to, offensive line. Like they've got 3 years of Chuk starting, 2 years of Dan Moore starting. The other guy, 2 years of Kevin Dodson starting. They know what those guys are, right? Like they've taken some time to explore their potential growth to get to a point right now where I think it's pretty clear, okay, they need more talent on the offensive line. I think they can take some time at wide receiver and maybe, find a slot guy, whether that's, a cheap free agent or just use the guys they've got or re-sign Steven Sims or whatever. And be patient with that. But that being said, if you look at those two teams and you're like, oh, well, I really need an AJ Brown, or I really need, a guy like that. Like, I don't even, that's not Jordan Addison either. Like Jordan Addison's more of another Deontay Johnson kind of receiver. Quentin Johnson from TCU might be and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I guess. And he has injury concerns. I'm not really sure how appropriate he is for 17, but Quentin Johnson to me is the only guy that really feels like in this draft class that is a game breaker type wide receiver. And even then, like this is just not that deep of a wide receiver. It's a deep wide receiver class, but doesn't have the high end that we've seen in some.
Yeah.
is.
like there are going to be good receivers from this class. I'm just not sure if you're going to get a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase, a game breaker that's like elite. I'm not sure if that's going to come out of this class. You could have top 15 guys come out of this class. Like you could have like a Keenan Allen. You could have a Deontay Johnson. You can have a guy like that who's really good and borderline top 10, but I don't think you're getting it. If you are getting like a guy like that, it's going to take time for them to develop into that. Like Quentin Johnson can be that, right? But like it took Devontae Adams 4 or 5 years to become Devontae Adams. Like that's what I think Quentin
AJ
Johnson.
Brown took 2 years to become AJ
Yeah.
Brown.
So like it's very rare that you get a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase that just steps right in and just does what they do. Even Garrett Wilson, who's really good, like he wasn't fully what they were, or Chris Olave. Like both of these guys are going to be really good receivers in the NFL, but they're not fully elite yet either. They're just really, really good right now. And I think Pickens is kind of in a similar boat where he's just really, really good. And it's kind of the question of if he can do that. But like another thing that you kind of look at from this game to me that kind of sticks out in terms of roster construction is if we're talking defense, like I want ball players. Like I want guys that can go out and get turnovers. And I think this is the one thing, and I tweeted it right after the game. This is the one thing unequivocally you cannot deny the Steelers have right. They have playmakers. They have Minka Fitzpatrick. Levi Wallace has good ball skills. Cam Sutton's a ball hawk. Like they have ball players that make plays on the football. They force a good bit of fumbles. They tied the league for interceptions this season. Like they had those guys. Demonte Casey was.
And they did that with half a season of TJ Watt. I said I think the only play on defense that mattered the entire game was a touchdown. Basically, the whole rest of the game, the defense was irrelevant. You look at the controversy, and I wrote about this, SteelersNow.com. The controversy over the holding penalty is the whole point. Like the defense doesn't matter. The league doesn't want the defense to matter. That's you can say like, oh, I don't like that call. The league loved that call. That officiating crew is getting a giant attaboy for saying that's the obstruction we don't want in this game. We want a receiver to have a free break. You're not allowed to play defense anymore. The only thing that matters is taking the ball away. It really, really is.
It really is. And the Steelers have that just down, man. I can't tell you, how much you can say they have that down. They brought in Terrell Austin with the very just aim of getting their turnovers up. You remember that kind of stretch where at the beginning of TJ Watt's career, they couldn't force turnovers like for a lick. And since he's come on, it's just gone way up. And they've gotten a lot better there. So I think that's like when we're talking about why they were 9-8, I think that's a big reason why, because they just forced a lot of turnovers. And so that's definitely a big reason, I think, why they were 9-8. And I think why they've been more successful than they probably should be in the past few years, because they force turnovers and they have that part of their roster construction down very good. And I think
if way he plays, man, that's Mike Tomlin's thing. Like that,
it is. And like, it's a
talent equalizer.
I'll say this. Let's like mesh this into the cornerback discussion. Like if you're looking at Steelers corner targets and they aren't good at just making interceptions, being a ball hawk, and being physical, you're doing it wrong. Like you need these three traits. You need physicality, you need to be able to tackle, and you need to be able to make plays on the football. And there are a number of guys that fit all three of those criteria in this class, because it's not like it sounds like it would be like very constricting, but it's not in this one at least. Like that's the Steelers. That's the Steelers.
It does like kind of cross some guys off or knock some guys down. Like I think if you like really want to look at like the options at 17, like I think like Joey Porter Jr. is obviously big and physical. He doesn't have great ball skills, right? Like he bats it away a lot. Did he have an interception this year? I don't think he did. I think that's a knock against him that if you're looking at the lessons from this game and the importance of turnovers, maybe stands out a little bit more.
I view this as a boost for Devin Witherspoon
and Christian Gonzalez.
Like, yeah, I mean, Gonzalez is less on the physical side, but like this is a huge boost for Emmanuel Forbes. Forbes was a walking pick six like this year. He is a ball hawk, which is why I could see the Steelers just falling in love with Emmanuel Forbes. But I think Devin Witherspoon, just something about him, man, it does. I hate calling a guy that I watch, a Steeler, but He does play like a Steeler corner. He's a junkyard dog. Also, Tyreek Stevenson is in that. You know, even when he struggled, he was still a playmaker. And I feel like he's got an ability to kind of really up his game. Like,
I'll
there's a lot
throw
of
another
guys.
one out there. Clark Phillips from Utah is a
Yep.
super physical guy that had 6 interceptions this year. He's probably not going to run that well. He doesn't have like the smoothest coverage technique, but he just finds the ball. And I think that's I think this game revealed how important that is, that like even really good corners, like I think James Bradbury and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, like there are really good defensive backs in this game, and they gave up 72 points of all passing offense, basically. Like it's the interceptions are what really matter.
Yeah, for all the people that say Mike Tomlin's system is archaic, I think the Super Bowl really spoke to his kind of truths defensively about, stopping big plays. True. You need to stop big plays. You need to get big plays on your own and get turnovers. You need to have a really strong front and get some pass rush, and you need to have physical playmaking corners. And I think that's what he believes in. And I'll tell you what, I agree with every single bit of that mantra after watching what happened. And you can look through like the last 4 or 5 years, and it's hard to not agree with him on defensive philosophy, kind of how he builds his defenses. I think he's got it.
So my one caveat there, and I'm going to transition into my next thing, is that I agree with all that, but I'm not sure that you can look at the balance of offense and defense in this game and say it makes sense to have the league's most expensive defense, right? Like I think his concepts, his ideas are correct, but I think there's still too much emphasis on the defensive side of the ball at times, and I think that hurts the Steelers. And especially when you look at, like, okay, my next point is everybody has talked about for the last few years how you got to win with a rookie quarterback, right? Like you can't pay a big time quarterback a big time salary and still put together a great roster that's going to win a Super Bowl. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs just proved that completely wrong, because they're paying Pat Mahomes more money than God, and they still have one of the probably the most complete roster in the league from top to bottom. So how do they do it? Well, you do it by being smart about where you spend your money, one, and two, incredible levels of success in the draft from rounds 1 to 7. They have so many guys on this team that were middle round draft picks in big roles. And they've really owned the draft in a number of ways, not just hitting on the picks that they have, but their aggressiveness in making trades to get additional picks and really maximize the amount of their cap space that's being spent on those cost-controlled rookie year contracts. Just like going through the list here of guys that the Chiefs drafted that are on rookie deals that are part of this, this win here. And it's really impressive. You got Mecole Hardman, Lucas Niang, Willie Gay, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Noah Gray, Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, Isaiah Pacheco, Sky Moore, George Carlyle. Like they're just, it's their whole draft is what wins this. Yeah, you got to have Pat Mahomes. Yeah, you got to have Travis Kelce, and those guys get a lot of money to do what they do. But the whole rest of the Chiefs, they're just draft pick wins, and that's why the team is as good as they are. And you can look at a lot of the same thing happening on the other side of the field in Philadelphia too.
Yeah, I mean, well, look at the Chiefs' defense. There's really only one star on that defense. It's Chris Jones, right?
Right.
Like, outside of that, I mean, they have good players. Frank Clark is really good, of course. I don't know if I would call him a star, but he's certainly on the borderline of being one. Like he's a very good player, and he shows up in the big time. But they don't have a star. They don't have a star in the defensive secondary.
No, and like the guys that made the biggest plays in that game were like Bolton and Chenal are like second and third round picks. Like it's
Yeah,
not.
right.
And
I mean,
second
I'll
and third
tell you
round
one of the
picks
best.
playing on rookie deals.
Like look at one of their best hits of the last like 3 years, and it's L'Jarius Sneed. Like, look at what he did. They drafted this guy in the 4th round out of
Right.
Louisiana Tech, and he is their best cornerback. He is everything they need him to be. He is awesome. And they spent, and Trent McDuffie, right? He stepped up. He allowed
Willie
the touchdown
Gay,
to
I
AJ
thought was
Brown,
really good for them too in that game. Like they got Trey Smith, right? You looked at this that 2021 offseason where the Steelers really needed to revamp their offensive line, and the Chiefs got Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith in the second round, the sixth round, and
Yeah, so they they went out and did that. Went out and got Joe Tooney. They get Orlando Brown. Like they did all of this. That's what they did. They revamped that O-line that entire offseason. Like that was their one main thing, and it worked out extremely well for them. And it's not surprising. And you just look at the Eagles too, right? I mean, the Eagles have more salary and more stars defensively.
they
So
do.
I'm not saying you
But
can't
they
have
also are.
stars.
They also still have their quarterback on a rookie contract, right?
Exactly.
We've
So
sort
like,
of acknowledged that you can do it that way. I think the Chiefs proved that there's another way that you can still have success while paying your quarterback. But obviously, I mean, the Eagles are set up to be a team that you think you could do that way, right? They've shown they've had the success in the draft that, like, I don't think Howie Roseman should be shaking in his shoes about eventually having to pay Jalen Hurts.
no, but I will also say this. I think we still before we kind of look at them. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. I think that is something we also have to take into consideration here. Just like the only guy before Mahomes that didn't win on a rookie deal before this was Tom Brady. But then came last year too, right? Matt Stafford. So we've now seen 2 straight years where the Rams did a little bit differently, though,
The Rams
right?
had a different model that was very clearly not sustainable. I feel
It
like
wasn't.
this feels different.
It
For the
does.
Chiefs.
But I will say for the Steelers, I wonder if the Rams' way of doing it is more about going about it because
Because the Steelers
maybe
are never
maybe
going to tolerate
I say
the
this. Well, I
eventual
say this
crash.
because I don't think Kenny Pickett's ever going to be a Mahomes tier. Like that's the thing. He could be a Stafford tier though. So
He could
I
be,
think
but they're not going to trade a bunch of first round picks and then deal with a big crash that's sort of inevitable coming, right?
that's
That's not
true.
the
They
Steelers
won't
way.
do that. But I do wonder if like going out and making, a more of an AJ Brown trade might be something that they have to do in the future, right?
The
Like maybe
salary
they
distribution of last year's Rams is probably feasible for the Steelers, just not the way they got there, right?
yeah, I think that they might what I'm trying to say is they might have to make that one big trade to get another star in, and they have to be willing to do that. They've been willing to do that. They did that with Minka, so they shouldn't shy away from it. I do think that before we kind of say you can win in another way, you have to put in that this was done by Patrick Mahomes. And maybe next year it's done by like Dak Prescott. And then I think you can say, all right, you can do it this way. But the Rams were unsustainable. The Patriots and Buccaneers did it with Tom Brady. But we've seen
Who
it
did
done.
not make that much money compared to some of his, especially when he was with New England. He really took a pretty
He
reduced
did.
contract.
But with the Bucks, he made a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
that's I think, and that wasn't Tom at Tom's height. Like that was a good Tom Brady, but he was maybe what fifth or sixth best in the league. So, is it just a Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes thing, or is this something that we can see other teams do? And I think that's kind of going to be the thing. When Joe Burrow gets paid, are the Bengals going to still be there? Is that going to be a
What's
thing?
going to happen with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, right. What's going to happen there? So I think we're going to learn just how sustainable this model is, and if it's just a Patrick Mahomes thing, or if it's like, all right, just because you have an elite quarterback anymore and you're paying him this much, you just got to draft well. And certainly the Steelers have that down. They build through the draft. So if you're looking from a Steelers perspective, they're on the right track if you think that's something that can happen.
Yeah. And they've got 4 years to figure out which way they need to go with this. Obviously, a long time before they have to worry about paying a quarterback. But I do think it just, I think a lot of people were putting some pressure on the Steelers about how, hey, they've got this opportunity is only open while Pickett is in his rookie deal. And I just think back-to-back Super Bowl winners, completely different models of quarterbacks that are not on their rookie deal, kind of says, hey, that's not really correct. Like, there's more than one way to do this. We obviously have an entire offseason to talk about that, but I thought it was important to kind of take the lessons from that Super Bowl and put them out here this week before we get on and start talking about the rest of this offseason. If there's a topic you'd like us to hit us up with a comment here on YouTube or on the site at SteelersNow.com. And we'll get to it because we've got about like 40 of these to do between now and the 2023 NFL draft. So we will eventually later kind of get into mock drafts and get into position by position. Obviously, we're going to the combine, we're going to pro days, we'll have free agency to talk about. So there's a lot going on. But yeah, if there's something specific you want us to hit, leave us a comment. We'll see if we can get to it. Nick, anything else before we wrap it up today?
No, I think that's all. I think we hit just about every base we could with the Super Bowl. But going forward, I think it's going to be more about like, let's talk about the Steelers, what they need, and how to approach this thing.
Yep, I've got a series this week on the site about the Steelers offseason needs, so maybe we will talk about that on Thursday. We're going to do this Tuesdays and Thursdays for a little while until we get into the real heavy part of the lead up to the draft, and then we'll go every day. That's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Alan Saunders. You can find us on social media and at SteelersNow.com, where you'll find this podcast and all the rest of our work. Until the next time, have a great day, and we'll see you soon.